The reason you're all here today is not to hear us talk, but to actually hear our guest speaker, who's our representative here in Morgan Hill. I have a bio for her, and it says you're born on December 21st, in San Mateo, California. Is that about right? Did I get the year right, Zoe? Okay, I just was curious about that. You got your JD cum laude from the University of Santa Clara in and it does say that you have a little bit of Stanford in you too. So you have a little bit of Stanford, a little bit of Santa Clara. That's fantastic, but I think the best part about it is that you are our representative and have been for the past 1994. So with that being said, would you please give us a real Morgan Hill welcome for Zoe Lofgren.
It's great to be here, and as Pete Cooper said, do you feel hounded to come here? And actually I don't. I'm glad to be invited. I think this is the first time I've been invited to the club, and it's been fun so far. What I thought I'd do is just talk about a few things that I'm working on that might be of interest, and then I'd like to save some time for your questions, and also I can always use advice, so you don't have to ask a question, just give me a piece of your mind would be fine as well. You know, Pete said that he suffered through Richard Pombo. I guess it's okay for me to quote you on that, Mr. Koutras. But I actually did represent Morgan Hill when I was first elected to the Congress, and then there was a redistricting, and I didn't ask to lose Morgan Hill. In fact, I love representing Morgan Hill, but it was moved away. And one of the things I promised to do when I lost Morgan Hill in that redistricting was to continue to work on the flood protection project for Youngest Creek. And the sad thing is, this takes so long that I now have, after 10 years of not having Morgan Hill, I have Morgan Hill back, and the project is still not done. So where are we on that? As we know, we have a member of the Santa Clara Valley Water District here, Dennis Kennedy, and he knows that my office is in constant communication with the Water District and also with the Army Corps. And I think we have made finally some progress. This is a difficult project to fund federally because honestly it doesn't meet the minimum cost requirements for the Army Corps of Engineers has to live under. That's important, but to me, to have the wonderful cities downtown underwater, I mean, this is not the third world. I mean, we need to have this project dealt with, and we need to figure out a way to pull the money together to make it happen. Now, the project as envisioned provides the so-called 100-year flood protection, and I think it would actually not only protect the properties in the downtown area, but also some of the agricultural areas that get flooded periodically. One of the things that Jerry McNerney represented Morgan Hill for a while. He's a really lovely guy. And one of the things that we needed to do was to get some federal money into this project so that the Water District could make a pitch to draw down state bond money. And I went to Jerry and I said, I need you to reallocate some money from one of your projects. And so he did. It was only about $50,000, but it was enough to keep the Army Corps and the Water District on track. So the Water District has assumed the lead in the design, and they're almost done with the design and the environmental oversight. But of course, these things never get done as you wish, and there are still some other hurdles ahead. One of the things that we're working on is to get some funding from the the NRCC? RCS, and Congressman Sam Farr, who now represents part of Gilroy, who's the lead Democrat in the Appropriations Subcommittee, is working with us to try and allocate those funds. So I guess, long story short, this is not yet done, but I actually am more optimistic right now than I have been for a long time that we're actually going to get this project done. And I see Dennis shaking his head, so we'll look to you to finish it, Dennis. The other thing I wanted to talk about water related is, of course, the drought. I don't know how many of you drive down I-5. I do because my husband's brother lives in Bakersfield, and we go, and I see these signs, you know, Congress responsible for Dust Bowl. I'm going, I didn't know we were that powerful, that we could keep it from raining. Because we now have such a drought that this is actually 50% worse than the last drought that we had. We've got 5% of normal in the snowpack, and we are going to have drastic reductions in allocation off the state and federal water systems to the Central Valley. There is going to be a tremendous reduction in ag production. There's going to be unemployment as a consequence of this. That is all a very terrible thing. But the Congress, I remember in the 1978 a drought that was so severe, there was a city councilman in Cupertino who in desperation said, we're going to pass an ordinance that says it shall rain. They did pass that ordinance, but the drought was not immediately interrupted. We do think that certainly the Dianne Feinstein's bill to allocate emergency resources is passed. I think that's a very important step forward to alleviate the effort. But one of the lessons that I think we need to learn is to prepare for the future. Even though we can't make it rain now, we've had arguments in this state for many years about water. As my colleague John Garamendi says, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. The Central Valley wants as much water as they can get. We actually in this valley use about half our water comes from the water project, although many people in our community don't know that. At the same time, we here in the Bay Area have a stake in not seeing the entire ecosystem of the San Francisco Bay degraded, and there's a lot of concern about the size of the tunnels that are in the proposed Delta plan. I chair the California Democratic delegation, and we got a briefing that if you turn those projected pipes on full bore, at some point they would drain the river. And of course that would lead to saltwater incursion problems, which we're already concerned about because of the natural drought. So this is not an easy thing to solve. And it occurred to me last year, I mean, we have fights in the state, we also have disagreements in the delegation, depending on where people are from, that what if we did this? What if we said, instead of what we disagree about, let's figure out what we agree on. And so I asked the members of the delegation, many of whom who are really very knowledgeable, Congressman George Miller, who is retiring this year, who's really an expert on the Delta, Congressman Jim Costa, who represents Fresno area and stands up for his constituents in the farming community, and others. And really what we realized is that we need to have off-stream storage for water more than we have today. And that there's consensus on that. Now where to do it, that's details that need to be worked out, and the details do matter, but off-stream storage is going to be a key to having a state that works in water for all of us. Not only because of the drought that we're currently facing, but we know with climate change, the amount of snowfall in the Sierra is going to change. It's going to be less. And if we don't take this time to prepare for that eventuality so that in wet times we can capture water to sustain us, we will be missing a bet. So I think that there's a growing consensus on that point in the state, and that's not going to make it rain today, but I do think, as always, Californians are able to face up to the challenges and actually succeed in meeting them if we can all pull together and focus on what's in our common interest. Just a couple of other things, and then I'd like to get your comments. I work on a lot of things. I mean, things that matter for the district, but I also try and think about things that will matter for the country at large and for our future and our Constitution. And one of the things that I have spent a considerable amount of time on is the issue of surveillance by the National Security Agency and other security agencies. I know many of you have probably read in the newspaper the information that really came about as a product of Mr. Snowden's leaking of information. I won't get into whether he's a hero or a bum. I mean, that's a big argument. But I will say the country would not have known about the extent of what was going on without the information that was released, and that includes the Congress. You know, we do have real enemies, and it's important that we protect ourselves from real enemies. At the same time, I've always believed that, you know, it's not discretionary to adhere to the Constitution. And I also believe it's not impossible to honor the Constitution and still protect yourself. So I was very disturbed when I learned that the phone call information of every single American was being collected, and certain other revelations, some of which I got in classified settings that I can't discuss here. And so we have made an effort on a bipartisan basis to try and rein in these practices and make sure that when we are searching the information of Americans, we do so on the basis of a probable cause warrant, which is what the Fourth Amendment requires. Recently, we had a bill that passed through the House Judiciary Committee, where I serve, that did some minor improvements forward. Unfortunately, after the bill was approved by the committee, in secret, it was changed, and really doesn't do much. So I'm continuing to work with a bipartisan group, and you know, you read about the contentious divisions in the House of Representatives. It's true, but my idea is if you don't agree with somebody on 8 things, that doesn't stop you from working on the 9th thing. And so we're working together with people who are very, Tea Party Republicans, and I'm not one, to try and put together a sound plan that will make sure that the Constitution is adhered to as we move forward in our quest to keep America safe. Another thing that I work on a lot, and then I'll stop and get your questions, is immigration. You know, when I was first elected to the Congress, no one actually even asked me what committees I wanted to be on. They just said, you'll be on Judiciary and Science. And I've stayed on those committees ever since. And I am now the senior Democrat on the Immigration Subcommittee and the Judiciary Committee, which is kind of the lead position in the House. Honestly, it's kind of, looking back, it's almost as if it was fated sometimes, because when I was a lawyer, I practiced immigration law, and at one time I taught immigration law at the University of Santa Clara Law School, so I have the burden of actually knowing something about immigration law. It's not always positive. And it's a very volatile subject in certain parts of the country. Passions are aroused by it. And one of the things I thought, again, how do you get people pulling together? We had secret meetings in the House of Representatives. We had a secret bipartisan group, about 20-25 people, and we met for 4 years without anybody finding out that we were meeting. Why did we meet in secret? Because for the Republican members, in particular from the South, they were exposing themselves to a lot of political attacks by discussing this subject. And it took so long because I wanted to make sure as we went through the issues, everybody understood what the law really was, as aside from the myths and the rhetoric, and had a discussion about what were the broad range of options to see if we could reach common ground. And the interesting thing is that we did. It's not everything I would have wanted, but it was a workable plan. And it wasn't everything all the Republicans wanted, but it was a workable plan, and we actually wrote a bill. But by the time we wrote that bill, the leadership on the Republican side, really pulled the rug out from under the Republican members, which I don't think they were honestly treated very fairly. And I don't blame them, they're very good guys. They really had to withdraw from the process. But the bill has been drafted, it's available to the Republican leadership. They are having a tremendous struggle to try and move forward on this, and wherever you are on the question, almost no one comes to me and says, I think the plan is to do nothing. You know, we do need to come to grips with the issues that face us, and it is a mess from top to bottom. Most people don't realize it unless somehow they, you know, weirdly enough bump into it because they've got some engineer they want to hire, or their son marries somebody from France and they find out their grandkids have to grow up in Paris. And, you know, there's a problem here that needs to be fixed, and it's something I care a lot about. It matters a lot to the country. The stakes are very high for the country and for the future. With that, let me just stop. As I say, I love representing Morgan Hill. I love coming down here. I love San Jose as well, but you kind of take a little sigh of relief when you get down to South County. It's a great place to be. I love working with your city council and your other elected officials, and I'm just really honored to be able to visit with you today. So let me stop now and thank you and get some questions. Don't all speak at once. Yes, sir.
Can you explain the immigration where they get a driver's license, and then so that people who are not citizens get a driver's license to drive, but yet that doesn't count to work? Can you talk about that?
Yes. Immigration is completely consumed by federal authority. Yeah, it's in the Constitution. That is, it's a federal. It's all federal law. Driving, of course, is the province for the states to decide. The federal government doesn't have any federal driver's licenses. Each state makes its own decision on who can drive and who can't drive. The difference, or the issue is that we commonly use our driver's licenses, which are issued by states, you know, under 50 different rules, as identification for federal purposes. To get on a plane or to enter a federal facility or the like. So a number of years ago, something called the Real ID Act, I had problems with other parts of the bill, to say that if you do a driver's license, you need to make it clear that it can't, if it's for somebody who is not lawfully present in the United States, which states have the right to do, you have to make it clear on the front of the license that it can't be used for federal purposes. Some states have decided, as California has, that not having driver's licenses doesn't help anything. I mean, the decision the state legislature and the governor made was, when you're driving down the road, the thing you want to know about the other drivers is, are they insured and are they trained? Not what their status is. So that was the decision the state was allowed to make, but it doesn't impact the legal status of people immigration-wise. The only way to do that is through federal legislation. Okay, does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
We were having a discussion. How do you separate your time between DC and your duties?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I was telling Pete, my daughter's getting married at the end of September. We're so thrilled.
You'll be here then, right?
We'll be here. And someone said, well, here? I mean, why not in Washington? I said, well, I live here. I live here and I work in Washington. It's a long commute. So here's my ordinary schedule. Next Monday, for example, we have, the House convenes at 6:30 in the evening. So I will be I'll leave my house at 5:30 in the morning, drive to the airport, fly to Washington, plane lands about 3:30, drive to the Capitol for first votes, and you know, depends on what's up, how long it goes. And I work like crazy as long as I'm there, and then the last vote will probably be Thursday because we're beginning on Monday, and as soon as the last vote is over, I rush for the airport and I fly home. So, and I do that every week. So,
Long commute.
it's a long commute, and somebody says, that's so awful. No, it would be awful to stay there all the time. That would be awful. This is fine. Sure. Yeah.
a lot of businesses are concerned about H-1B visas for employees, and then there's the controversy about, well, why not hire our own American employees rather than providing these H-1B visas. So what is your take and approach to dealing with that?
The question for those who couldn't hear is, what about these H-1B visas, hiring them? Some people say hire Americans. I think there's a role for the H-1B visa program, but I think it needs reform. I used to hear a lot from engineers in particular complaining about H-1B computer guys in particular who were being paid too low. And if you take a look at the structure of the program, it's true. And it's not even the fault necessarily of the employers. The Department of Labor has a schedule for what the wages are supposed to be for each job category in the whole country that's used for immigration. And if you take a look at level 1 wages for computer programmers in the Silicon Valley, it's like, 53,000, it's not the exact number, but like 53,000, something like that. Well, you go down to Google, as a computer programmer, they're going to pay you 120,000. So it's not the right, it does in fact undercut wages of Americans, and that's not right. I mean, if this is going to be somebody that you really need to grow your economy, you need to pay, the regular wage. So when we wrote this bill, and I've insisted on this in some of the other proceedings we've had, we need to fix that. Because if there's somebody who's important to a company, that's probably good to get that person in, because that person is going to lead to prosperity and other jobs, but you don't want it to be a way to just, cut costs with cheap labor. On the other hand, the H-1B visa program is a temporary program. And what's really missing in terms of competitiveness is permanent visas. I'll give you a great example. There's a guy who visited with me about a month ago now. He had, he was a very distinguished guy. And he had gone to Harvard, he'd gone to Stanford Engineering School. He has offers from all over the world. He wants to be an American. He's here on a H-1B visa because of the country he was born in. He's looking at a 70, that's 70-year wait to get a visa number to become a permanent resident. And he's saying, well, should I get married? Should I buy a house? Should I take the offer I got from Germany? I'm going, hold on, we're going to reform the law. But we haven't yet. So I think the main thing is to sort out what's good for America. And if there are people who are really hotshots and we can use them here, probably they're going to create new products that are going to create new jobs. And that's what we want. So it's a matter of sorting what's best for the country, I think. Who else has a question? Yeah?
Yeah, how did you feel? I'm sure you're very intimidated, but when you first entered Congress, how did you feel? And then how have you evolved over the years as far as the way you see yourself and the way that you see the system?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, he assumes I was intimidated when I first got to Congress. How this is evolved? Is that right? Well, never assume. As the people who run for office, running for office is not for wimps. It's can be rough and tumble. And actually yesterday was the anniversary of my first election, and honestly, I was not expected to win that election. The Mercury News was supporting a different candidate. The Chamber of Commerce supported that same candidate. The labor union supported that same candidate, and I just kept putting one step in front of the other, and then I won. So that was fun. And when I assumed, as you know, that although it's not in the Constitution, the Congress is organized along party lines, and the Democrats, and I am a Democrat, had been in the majority for 40 years, and I just assumed when I ran that I would be the least senior member of the majority party. course, that fall, the Republicans took the majority, and I was instead the least senior member of the minority party. There is nothing lower than that. So I'll never forget, my husband and I went out to Washington after the primary election. Congressman Don Edwards, who, by the way, is great. I talked to him yesterday. He's 99 years old. And I said everybody talked about him all the time. He's a wonderful man. He took me and my husband to lunch. And so we were sitting in the members' dining room, and Congressman Henry Hyde, who was about to become chairman of the Judiciary Committee, was walking by, and Don said, "Henry, I want you to meet the person who's going to take my seat." Henry came over, he stuck his hand out to my husband. And said, "Congratulations." So it could only go up from there. It's an interesting experience. I've learned a lot. One of the things, there's a pro and con with seniority. Obviously, you need to keep your energy up, your interest up, your willingness to take things on. Some members get tired. I still get kind of feisty. But seniority also, now I'm second to the top on the Science Committee, and I get a lot more say on what's going to happen. I'm third from the top on the Judiciary Committee. So, you get, as you're there, you learn the ropes, and then you get a bigger chance to move things in one direction or another. I'd like to be chair of the Judiciary Committee. Yes?
Is Congress going to be investigating the supposed the alleged violation of President Obama into releasing getting the release of prisoners from
The prisoner exchange? I don't know. I just got an email that there's going to be a classified briefing for the Congress at 5 p.m. on Monday, which I'll go to, and I'll find out more than I know today about that. At this point, I really don't know any more than you know from the newspaper, so I really wouldn't be able to say at this point. Gentleman, way in the back.
Thank you, Congresswoman. By the way, I hope you get a lot of free airline miles for your community. You mentioned the NSA. One thing that other senior citizens, others that I know over the past year, there's been a rampant escalation in robo-telemarketing calls. And my friends and I were on the Do Not Call list, we're on whatever. You mentioned the NSA computers. There's that beautiful facility in Utah that tracks every telephone connection. I think I've come up with a plan to make this work. Escalating the fines for the offenders to about $1 million. Who's the right person in your office to call?
Well, I don't know, but that's a creative idea on how to use the NSA technology for the good of the American people. Well, you just told me. Let me see if that... But also, I've heard complaints. I'm on the Do Not Call list as well. It is a violation. There are fines available, but some people do it. So we're willing to, to track that down and to help. Honestly, I think the NSA would resist the use of their supercomputers for the purpose you've outlined, but... Thank you. We have one more, I guess. Oh, time for one more. Yes?
I was hoping you might be able to give us an overview of Congress's take on the FCC's proposed changes to net neutrality.
Well, there's a division in Congress, so I'll tell you what I think. When you think back to how the internet really became commercially available, and it really didn't take off until the mid-90s, it was always against the rules for the providers of so-called pipes to decide who got to see what. And that was really true until just the last few years when there was a court decision overruling the FCC's legal authority to do that. In my opinion, they need to if they need to reclassify as a common carrier, they should do that. They need to make sure that the providers of the internet service don't get to decide for each one of you what you're allowed to see. In my opinion, we should not turn the internet into the equivalent of cable TV. And that's what it will be if we cannot protect net neutrality. Anna Eshoo, who is our congressional neighbor just to the north, is the top Democrat on the Telecommunications Subcommittee and Energy and Commerce. She and I are working together on this to try and help the FCC get to where they need to be. I am very disappointed with what Chairman Wheeler has done so far, and unless we can get some improvement on that, there's those of us who really care about internet freedom are going to be in the President's face on this. So, thank you very, very much.